Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphan Last, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm going to go ahead and draw another illustration set in my galactic ring sort of intellectual property that I'm kind of creating. It's not necessarily something that has a story or anything, but at least not at this point. I'm not a very good author, so I'm not going to pretend as though this is going to be something that's going to be fully fleshed out, at least not for a really long time. But yeah, I mean, it's just something that looks cool. It's kind of a combination of the ideas of Star Wars and Stargate kind of mashed together, and I would love to see this. But anyways, I do some stuff inside of this video that I normally don't do. I kind of discussed inside of my landscape video that these more complex brushes that try to make it so that you could quickly and easily construct an entire tree with just a few strokes of a brush. I mentioned that I would never use those as the finished work. You saw that I planted them down. I went ahead and kind of traced it out a little bit. I didn't trace out every single detail or anything like that. But I'm all, like right now, right here at this phase in the illustration, this is all sketch phase. None of this is considered finished work. So from where it is right now to where it winds up is completely different from the work that you initially saw, both with the super complex brush that left all that detail on there with, you know, the initial stuff for the trees, and then I guess the whole tracing stuff. By the time that I'm finished, these trees do not resemble what they initially appeared to be. I even use some interesting looking vines. Now all of these are downloadable off of the Clip Studio Paint asset library, and you can use them commercially and stuff like that, just as long as you don't try redistributing them and trying to pass them off as your own or something like that. As long as you're basically just being respectful with these tools, you're allowed to use them commercially. And you can see that, again, I'm not really treating it as finished work. What's really nice is that, especially with these vines, you know, they have this pressure sensitivity, and so that can give you the sensation that a vine starts out quite a distance away from you, and then it comes up close and personal, and it adds a lot of depth. And although I am kind of tracing at this point, there is a layer of detail that I wind up putting into all of these. When I go into the inking phase especially, you can see me decide, I don't like that leaf, I like how this leaf curves, but I want to change the way that this other leaf curves, and there's all these different sorts of decisions that you have along the way. You'll notice that occasionally I turn off all of the layers except for the one that I'm working on occasionally, just simply because sometimes it just gets really convoluted. And, you know, I kind of thought, you know, this could very easily be on an alien planet. So I decided maybe if there was some sort of tree that kind of creates an arch, that would be kind of interesting. And so I went ahead and created that, and then kind of fleshed it out. And yeah, once again, this is kind of tracing, but you'll see as the video continues, it's not just mere tracing. I mean, there's a layer of detail and a layer of thought being utilized throughout the entire process, and it's not completely dependent upon somebody else's work. And that's the thing, like, if it just feels like I'm tracing and that the end result is not going to be my work, I'm not going to do it. And here I'm kind of laying things down for, you know, the lighting inside of the scene. I decided that this would have a lot of cross-hatching as well. And I decided to use a new brush. Again, I got that, like, for inking, and it was supposed to, at least from what I understood, it was supposed to resemble a fine liner, but it really did not resemble that kind of workflow at all. It more so felt like more of an ink brush than anything, but I was totally happy with that because it felt like it had a little bit more control than the default inking brushes that come with Clip Studio Paint. Now notice how I did these, the grass there. That is the full rendering of the grass all the way to the completion of the image. You can get away with little things like this, and this is something that I've kind of learned from artists like I would say mostly Frank Miller and Todd McFarlane. They use silhouettes in a really interesting sort of way, and sometimes I got tired of trying to lay down so much black. I really like having a workflow that more so resembles just working with pencil and paper, but sometimes when you have to lay down tons and tons of black, just making a selection and then just using the fill tool, that's always nice to use. And so yeah, you can see me starting to use it here and there. I could have used it probably more, and I really liked the way it looked actually after the fact, and I think I use it like 3 or 4 more times, but sometimes it just doesn't occur to me sometimes just to use that. You can see me starting at, this is obviously the inking phase. You can see me starting to flesh out the cross hatching, and at this point, you always want your image to look good, and I guess sometimes people think that an artist knows exactly how the picture is going to turn out, from start to finish. And although I had a very clear idea as to how it was going to turn out, because I created the rough sketch, the second pass, and then all of that, how the lighting and everything is going to look, how the shadows are all going to come together in the final composition. Some of that seems to be a little bit of guesswork for me at this point. Of course, you always want it to look good, this I knew that I wanted to get this video done by Sunday, and lo and behold, I'm releasing it on Sunday. And the thing is so I had a deadline, a really, really strong deadline, and so I knew I had to get this done quick, but yet I didn't want that pressure of getting this thing done quick basically loom over my head to the point to where the image wound up suffering. So I treated it just like any other image. I gave it as much time as it needed, even if I had to stay up all night in order to get the image finished, which I didn't have to, surprisingly. But I was totally willing to do that up until, I needed to illustrate the characters, to kind of polish them off and do a second pass with their poses, as well as do the final inking process with them. I got up to that point, went to sleep, woke up, and then finished the image. In total, working on this took 8 hours, 8.5 hours to be exact, and I think that this is looking good. Just pay attention to like the leaves and stuff like that. By and large, even though I'm loyal to the actual brush that I used to create this stuff, I did pay attention to, okay, where is gravity pulling on this leaf or that leaf, and tried to kind of vary it up a little bit more. You can see that I added a huge, completely different layer of detail to these vines. Initially, they were very simplistic, and I added a whole new layer of complexity to them. It wasn't just me depending upon that brush in order to create these, and you can see that I added little bits of overlap. Sometimes a vine will splinter off into a Y intersection, and then it'll kind of wrap around another vine, and you can see that as some of these vines extend off out in towards the distance, some of them are being basically transitioned over to becoming silhouettes. Some of them are 100% silhouette, and some of them are just partially silhouette. I just thought that looked cool, and I mean, why the heck not? I mean, who knows what the lighting is as it goes off out into the distance inside of this forest. And here, this little things like this took forever. And drawing each and every single blade of grass, trying to think of overlap, how I could make the image look more interesting with the use of overlap, and all of that. And it's the concept of overlapping arches and stuff like that. You want to be careful with this because especially when you're dealing with long stringy objects like grass, you could make it look like the grass is weaving together and forming into things like braids and stuff. And although that might be interesting to see on an alien planet, I don't think I wanted that on this particular image. And I made sure to kind of vary up the thickness of my brush as well, especially when I got to the 100% black little regions of everything, and then I would thin it out as it would get closer and closer towards the edge, where there would be actual more lighting in the scene. And most objects, they have shadows on the right side of them, but I knew that there was going to be two light sources right smack dab in the middle of this tree archway. Now, notice how, once again, the blades of grass that happen to be here, I have some where I have rendered out some blades of grass right here, every single blade of grass all rendered out, and then others that are a negative silhouette, and then another set that are, just a normal black silhouette here. And all of this seems to mesh together rather well, I feel. And the thing is if you only know one little trick, one little way to render something, then basically what winds up happening is everything inside of the image looks the same. There is no variation, and it gets boring to look at. If I rendered each and every single blade of grass inside of the scene the exact same way, let's say I rendered them all out as if every single blade of grass was rendered. There's already a lot of detail inside of this scene, and when everything just has just a massive amount of detail inside of your scene, there's ultimately nothing to look at. People will look at it, they'll be like, huh, okay, well that is a lot of detail, and then they'll stop looking at it anymore. And sometimes, a newbie artist, they'll listen to that statement, well that's a lot of detail, and be like, oh, I feel a sense of pride. And yes, that can be a good thing to have a good layer of detail and stuff like that, but a bad layer of detail where it's just so much that there's literally nothing to look at, there's just too much going on in the scene, then it's a problem. That's a little bit of advice, I guess, that I could give to some newbie artists and stuff like that. And you can see that as I'm rendering out these trees and such like that, that I am making different decisions than just the tracing. The initial, brush pass, the initial pass that I did with the super advanced brush, that's gone. I deleted that layer a long time ago at this point, and everything that I'm doing from that point forward is all me. It's all my decision process from that point forward. And so a lot of cool stuff was able to happen because of that. Now, if there's one regret with this image, it's this. I wound up just pretty much doing everything on one layer for the most part. Sometimes I would create a new layer, but then I would just merge it in with the primary main layer. And sometimes this is a nice workflow, but when you have to do a lot of cross-hatching and you have to worry about this whole complex system of vines and grass and stuff like that, and all of this cross-hatching needs to happen around all of that, it gets really difficult to make everything feel consistent. Now, most of the cross-hatching that I do with this tree, I wind up actually erasing and redoing. I was completely unhappy with it later on down the road. Now, I guess, now that I'm looking at it right now, I guess I could have just gotten away with it, but even still, I am glad that there are times where I just stopped, looked at my image, and said it's not good, and it's time to just throw out the things that just aren't good. And initially, before I started to actually start recording this bit of footage here, I actually wanted to fully adopt a lot of the techniques that I kind of discussed in my previous video, where I was looking at Jeff Smith's artwork for the Bone comic book series. But I wound up recording footage of some artwork that I wound up not really liking. So this is actually my second attempt at this image. And the thing is if you're working on something and you set out to be like, okay, I'm going to copy this artist's style, you're probably not going to wind up with a very good image, it seems like. And I keep relearning that particular bit of information right there, where basically, copying someone else's style, it's okay to learn from somebody else, but, their style is their style. There's, like, I guess you can copy it up to some extent, but since it's not yours, then you're not, I don't know, you're letting a system of rules depict what your image is going to wind up being, rather than using a system that feels natural to you. And I still wound up, like, you can see, like, the rendering of these rocks, the shapes of the rocks in the scene. There are overlapping arches inside of the scene as well, and just generally there are things that I wound up using from the Bone comic book series that I discussed previously, but I did it in my way. I didn't just depend upon a system of, I guess, rules. Now, earlier, just a few minutes or seconds ago, you actually saw me just plant down some vines. And the thing about a lot of these more advanced brushes is that they actually have, like, the interior of these brushes a solid white. And I don't like that, but the cool thing about that is that you can apply a gradient map and have it be a gray on one end of the spectrum, and then the same color of gray on the other end of the spectrum, and then you wind up having an instant silhouette with the shape of a vine. And that was cool. I really liked that. I mean, that's the only thing inside of the scene where it's like, okay, well, that's 100% the brush, other than the fact that I applied, a gradient map to it to make it into a silhouette. But it takes up so little of the scene, and it's just such a slight texture to the scene that most people won't even look at or notice those things. Here you can see me starting to flesh out the characters. I really lowered the opacity on the background at this point, and the thing that's really standing out on the canvas at this point is merely and just the initial sketch. And if you compare the initial sketch with the actual work, that's the finished work and stuff like that, it's kind of cool to look at. I don't know if I have the initial sketch still on the scene or still inside of the file, but it is sometimes interesting for me to see where did this composition start and where did it wind up. And by and large, I was pretty loyal to the initial sketch and such like that. So the second pass was mainly me just kind of cleaning up the line work, trying to get it separated from all of the lines that were created for the basic initial, sketch and stuff like that. And, here, for some reason, the bad guy in the scene with long hair, he wound up, I wound up illustrating him pretty much with the exact same sort of workflow that I would normally have for, pencil and paper. Whereas the other character, the main character, I guess, I kind of, I wound up doing like a third pass on him, and then did the ink work on him. So that's kind of weird how that worked out. And, I wound up actually just holding my hand out while drawing this character, and just kind of roughly used my own hand as a bit of a reference for him holding this electro blade out and all that. You know, I like how the bad guy is, but you know, I think that he's not quite as animated as I would have liked him to be, but basically the general idea is that he's airborne, jumping backward, and that's fine if he doesn't necessarily look like that. But that's, yeah, I mean, either way, it's interesting to see what your initial ideas were for the scene and how it winds up looking towards the end. I guess I could just put a shadow out there closer to us that's kind of shaped like him, but you know, it just didn't seem really all that necessary. I mean, all the main things inside of the scene are there. So here, oh, you know what? I did not illustrate the main character's cape. That's interesting. I mean, inside of this third pass, you can see that I sketched out the cape, but I didn't actually use it. And so, yeah, here I'm inking out the main character, trying to make him look as dynamic as possible, kind of comic booky looking feel and look to him. And you know, this took time, but you know, it didn't take nearly as long as it would have, or at least as long as it did for the background. At this point, you know, the layer mask, for some reason I was having issues with it, and so I watched, I just skipped around in a few videos to see, okay, how does Clip Studio Paint work with layer masks again? And, you know, it worked exactly the way that I thought it did, is the funny thing. It worked exactly the way I thought it did. It's just for some reason it wasn't cooperating with me until after I watched the tutorial, which is kind of weird. And so here, this is the point when I just decided, okay, I'm going to start, you know, cross-hatching this stuff for the characters. And, you know, I feel like I'm starting to get better at the cross-hatching. I've wound up watching a few videos on how other artists do cross-hatching. I wish there was more terminology oriented around this whole process of cross-hatching, so that, you know, newbies can learn. Like, that's the thing, you know, if you know the terminology of a thing, of a specific topic, then basically what you have are all of the things that are necessary to get good search results. If you don't know the right search results, if you don't know the right terms, then Google, YouTube, all that will give you everything that you don't want to know, instead of everything that you want to know. And you know, if there was more terms, official terminology oriented around cross-hatching, it would be a little bit easier for me to learn how to do it. But you know, you can see me experimenting with trying to kind of sculpt, shape, form on these characters, especially on this guy's torso, and I think it came together well. To be honest, I think it came together well. And yeah, you can see me struggling with trying to cross-hatch in between each blade of grass, because everything's been merged onto just one layer. You can see just little moments here and there where I'm struggling with it. And then I decided, okay, well, it's time for the lighting inside of the scene. And so I set my brush to being white, and I did. At this point, I really just wanted to be finished with the image. But like I said, I wanted to give this image its due justice. I wanted it to turn out good, regardless of the fact that I set a really strong deadline for myself. And so I committed myself to just finish the image with the highest quality possible with the time that I'm allowed to have. And you can see me doing a huge layer of you know, work with just the white. and at this stage it kind of got me thinking, you know, what would be interesting is if my initial sketch, if I could actually do my initial sketches with white. That way, you know, when you're working with pencil and paper, you're drawing really lightly, and the idea is that you're not going to erase your sketch at any point in the time. You just start drawing with darker lines, and your sketch just winds up kind of disappearing in all of that. Now, if I could start with my initial sketch with white lines on a gray canvas, then in theory I should be able to work with my blacks and work with my whites simultaneously and have that initial sketch kind of just disappear. And so here's the final image inside of the scene. You know, I think it looks really sharp. I think it came out looking great. It's one of my better images, and you know, I have to say I have a little bit of pride that I was able to get this image done, and with the quality that is presented. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you guys would like to have more participation with my community, feel free to join my Discord. A link is in the video description below. If you'd like to support this channel, there's an image of my mascot in the upper right corner of the screen. It leads to my Patreon, or feel free to purchase one of my t-shirts. Again, a link is in the video description below. Any support would be much appreciated. And if you've enjoyed this content and would like to see more, feel free to click on anything else that's appearing on the screen right now. Thank you very much for your time.